Huh? What a game. Man, what a game that Duke Virginia Tech game. What a game it was, huh? Regardless, I think we'll talk Ohio State, Penn State first. I just have a hunch a few more people might be interested in that one. Of course, we won't ignore a lot of other big games that happened tonight. Notre Dame with a huge, enormous win over Stanford. And look at the Irish's schedule and who they've already beaten. Notre Dame set up for the college football playoff with no losses in all the most difficult games it would appear behind them. So big game for Notre Dame in resounding fashion in the fourth quarter against Stanford. Ohio State wins a thriller as what we have seen in 2014, 16, 17, and now 18 against Penn State. Another classic that obviously gives what appears to be the best team in the Big Ten a huge leg up against Penn State and the rest of the division foes. We also had Virginia Tech and Duke. Big win for the Hokies as they mount a second win in the ACC and bounce back from the embarrassment against Old Dominion. Big night of college football. Let's not forget about LSU. They continue their march through the SEC. They're up big on Ole Miss right now, 28-6. We're going to go through the entire night, but of course it starts in Happy Valley, where things weren't so happy for the Buckeyes for most of this night. Penn State had the lead for most of the game. The Buckeyes with a slim lead, 14-13 at one point in the second half for a while. But Penn State came back with a couple scores and took what it appeared to be control of the game, especially once they pinned the Buckeyes back inside the 5-yard line. So I've invited media guests on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to join us. So those media guests, if you're watching, that means it doesn't have to be about Ohio State, Penn State. There's a whole lot of college football to talk about here. Kentucky with a huge win tonight against South Carolina as the Wildcats move on to 5-0. We mentioned the Notre Dame win against Stanford. USC and Arizona playing right now as the Trojans try to take control of the Pac-12 South Division. Washington with a blowout of BYU. Of course, the Notre Dame game. And all the games, Florida and Mississippi State as the Gators win one against the Bulldogs. And, of course, earlier in the day, we capped off most of the action from the noon and 3:30 windows. Wow, that play call at 4th and 5. I like Herbstreit and Fowler rarely, as they mentioned post-game, rarely tear into play calling because these guys know what they're doing. They're the best in the business. They're great regardless of the team. They're generally great at what they do. A few bad ones sneak through and get a good position and make bad play calling, and then they are dismissed typically. Yes, it's not that they're beyond reproach, but these people know much more about football than any of us. Trace McSorley, arguably the best player on the field, not as an NFL player, as a college football player, possibly the best player on the field. In a stadium that featured all sorts of tremendous efforts in football players, when you look at, wow, a lot of great talent out there. But in terms of experience and gamesmanship and just that gamer mentality, Trace McSorley probably should have had the ball in his hands. 5 yards to gain on the ground against the Ohio State defense without giving McSorley the option of throwing it, finding a guy to throw to, or running it himself when he was so effective. He set the Penn State quarterback record for rushing in one game, obliterated the record from 1938. Not to give that guy, the guy that has won championships at each level, not to give that guy the opportunity to win the game, not to give that guy the last chance, not to place most likely the Big Ten championship in his hands. What do you think Joe Moorhead would have done? All right, I'll let you know what stood out to me. Of course, we joined you at halftime with the Nittany Lions up at that point 13-7. They had taken a 13-0 lead. They dominated most of the first half. The Buckeyes defense ran ragged by McSorley on a 51-yard run, a great catch by Juwan Johnson, and of course the KJ Hamler 93-yard play that we described at halftime as just a remarkable play. So between Johnson, McSorley, and Hamler, they were the best offensive players. They were the sparks. They were the dynamic players in this game in the first half. But the Buckeyes got the McSorley or the Miles Sanders fumble and took over at the 30-yard line and got the short field and finally got some offense generated to J.K. Dobbins on the swing pass to make it 13-7. So we got you caught up at halftime. Since halftime, this is what comes to mind. We saw a completely different Ohio State offense, at least out of the gate in the second half. The offensive line was blocking. They threw out some swing passes. They must have seen something in the coverage on the perimeter because they went heavily with the quick shots to the outside as I'm going to receive a call right here. And, of course, the number's 860-325-3687. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark.
Hey.
Oh, my God. Did you see those games today?
Did I see the games today? Yeah, I caught a few games today.
Better and better. I know you did. I'm being facetious.
I'm being facetious. Of course, I caught the games. Yeah. So which one did you like the best?
I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I know which one you liked the best because your Gators went to Starkville and beat Mississippi State, as I predicted.
My brother.
Yes?
I just talked to my brother in Mississippi. And
All
he
right.
said that was the most boring game I ever saw. 13-6.
It was the most boring.
Really?
No.
I thought it was 150. That was the craziest game I ever watched in my life.
No. I talked about that game at halftime. I had that game while I was watching some other games. I had that game on my laptop right in front of me. I thought it was an entertaining game. No, those teams aren't great. They made a lot of mistakes. They missed a lot of throws by both quarterbacks. We expected all that. It wasn't going to be the prettiest thing, but it was a hard-fought game and a close game down to the last possession. It's a good college football game.
It was very exciting.
Who do you think is maybe a little bit better than you anticipated coming into this Saturday and maybe not as good as you thought?
Well, it's not 15-1.
Has anybody changed your mind? Has anybody changed your mind?
I was a little bit crushed by Penn State cheating to lose the game tonight. A stupid run play.
Yeah, that was a bit odd.
Ohio State, all they had to do was call the right play, and they would have won. I mean, come on. God.
Well, I don't know if they would have won. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but that was not the play to call. That was not the play to call. But of course, the hindsight is. Yeah, so that was the play that sent you down. Yeah.
Notre Dame won. I lost that one. I let Uncle Lou talk me into betting Mississippi State. I lost the Florida game. The only hope I have left is Hawaii, San Jose State. Go Hawaii.
All right. If we're just talking about straight up, plays here, George, last check, let's see. Who did I pick this week? Miami, that's a win. Alabama, that's a win. Clemson, that's a win. West Virginia, that's a win. Michigan State, that's a win. Texas A&M, that's a win. Georgia, that's a win. Central Florida, that's a win. Texas, that's a win. Michigan, that's a win. Florida, that's a win. Utah, that's a loss. Virginia Tech, that's a win. Penn State, that's a loss. Notre Dame, that's a win. Kentucky, that's a win. Washington, that's a win. LSU, that's a win. USC's up 17-0 right now. That would be a win. Oklahoma, that's a win. Auburn, that's a win. North Carolina State, that's a win. I think that's like 20-2 right now.
You made up for last week.
Yeah, and against the spread, I'm looking at about 16-7. Yeah, I made up for last week.
Yeah, and I'm having my beat down week, but I'm just doing it for fun on a $30 a year bet.
Sure.
I don't really care.
Yeah, it's all fun.
I mean, if I didn't pick some teams, games, I wouldn't even be able to talk about anything. But that's really impressive what you just said. That's actually kind of incredible.
Well, some days you get lucky. Some days, what's the old saying? I don't know what the old saying is, but some days you have some good days and other days not so much.
Listen, in Oregon, up until a few years ago, they had legalized betting on NFL games. It was legal. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I want to keep us on track. George, anybody watching us wants to hear about college football. We're going to talk about college football. All right. We can talk about NFL betting in Oregon some other time.
But they had official betting on.
No, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about college football. All right. We'll talk about NFL betting in Oregon.
The only reason I brought it up is to say inevitably, if I pick a four pick every week, I have one losing team out of those four. I can pick 12 games right and only have 2 wrong, but on a 4 pick, I have 1 wrong. You follow me? It's hard to do. It's hard to get 4 right and parlay it.
Absolutely. That's why it's a parlay. That's why you make more money if you win.
Right. It's hard to do.
Yeah, I don't mess around with those.
Teams right, but get 4 of them on 1 ticket. Yeah.
All right.
Start the 4-ticket parlay. Mark Rogers 4-ticket parlay. You know, we're never wrong.
Yeah. I would not want anybody to wager $1 based on anything that I said. But we're
yeah, and don't I agree. Don't bet over $20 in this all for fun and games.
Yeah, so I will spit out my numbers when I do my picks next week, but they're looking better, yeah, after today.
All right, I think it was a great week of football, man. I felt bad sometimes the way Georgia was smacking Tennessee around. I was quit hurting them guys. You know, it was a kind of a hurtful thing to see. You know, I think as far as your radio persona goes, let's go a whole new direction. Let's start a safe space where you can't badmouth nobody and you have to talk good about the other people's teams. Like a gym where you can lift weights even if you're little and skinny. No one laughs at you.
That's like the Planet Fitness that I go to where they say let's
translate that into the Mark Rogers forum.
No grunting, no dropping weights.
Right, no grunting.
That's not going to be any fun. You're wiping out my live chat by doing that.
I'm looking for a niche here because I was encouraging you to be like other people, and I'm thinking maybe there's another angle. I don't know.
No, I'll just be myself, and if we need to, we'll shut down at some point. if that's what it comes to.
I want to say the reason I thought of that is I want to compliment Tennessee and Kentucky sometime, and these other teams. I don't want to be ashamed to say Miami looked good this week. You know, why not?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Whatever.
Did you see my video a couple days ago where I wore my Ohio State stuff? Did you happen to see that video?
I actually did.
Okay. Yeah, you commented on the video. So I'm glad
they backed you up.
I picked Penn State to win this game. So I'm staying neutral. I'm still staying neutral. I can stay with neutral. I know people don't believe this. Some people don't believe this. Some people back me that I can stay neutral and unbiased with my analysis and still see the game as I see it, but I still root like heck for the Buckeyes. I picked Penn State to win.
Right. Hey, listen, all the other guys are doing the same thing anyway. They just have a different presentation. Uncle Lou does nothing but rag on Georgia, and Pete rags on Clemson, and Alonzo rags on Miami. They're all telling the truth. They're like, where's the run game? What happened to defense? Fire that defensive coordinator. You know, everyone's doing the same thing.
Yep.
Just doing it from a different angle. But at the end of the day, you have to be objective.
George, one of these days, I'm going to open up the live chat and everything else, and we're just going to talk about my channel and get people suggestions. But for right now, with all that college football going on, I want to answer the live chat, and we're going to talk nothing about college football.
I'll watch online. Talk to you later.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's the incomparable George, but we need to talk college football, not betting in the NFL, in Oregon, or my channel, or anything else. Nothing but college football. There's too much to talk about tonight to talk about anything else. Let me get to the live chat and also remind everyone it's 860-325-3687. Okay. And it's always a good place to be if you do throw $1 or $2 on the game. when your team wins, but you also took the other team plus the points. Penn State plus 4. That's a good place to be. Buckeyes win, Penn State plus 4. All right, let's see what you guys have in the live chat. And again, it's 860-325-3687. Drake joins us, says, congrats to Notre Dame. Didn't think they would beat Stanford. So obviously Notre Dame with Ian Book at quarterback is a much different football team. They put 59 on the board against Wake. Sure, Wake isn't great, but with Brandon Wimbush in the lineup, Notre Dame doesn't score 59 against Wake. That's the most points that they had scored on the road in 15 years. They play Stanford tonight. Maybe they didn't get the Cardinals' best, but they faced one of the top 15 teams in the country, and they rolled in the fourth quarter, 38-17, I believe was the final, as I caught about 15 or 20 plays of that game. In commercials, I've got it on DVR. I'll give it a look. I'll give you my full analysis, but I've seen enough of Notre Dame and Stanford this year, and I see some of these questions coming. Green Man, I can't remember the last time I felt this bad from a Buckeye win. Okay. All right. Also, JMD, this is the first time I've seen you on the live chat. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Yay, Mark, our team won. JMD. JMD must be a viewer. I did not know. Jay, we appreciate you jumping on board. Always let us know who your team is, which obviously it's the Buckeyes, and how long you've been watching us. OH, we've got an OH from NCIS Fanatic 21, who was in my direct messages during the game on Twitter, bashing Urban Meyer. NCIS Fanatic 21. You and, was it Buckeye State Sports? You guys are ready to get rid of the guy. He's 75-8. He's 75-8. He's, yeah. All right. Not all the wins are going to be pretty. Not when you're playing in that environment. Penn State had won 14 consecutive home games. Tucker Phillips, just wow, I'm so glad we won, but how could they make that call on 4th and 5? You got me. You're facing, even without Nick Bosa, the second or third best defensive front in college football, and even with some of the issues they had. And I didn't notice if Draymond Jones came out for the last series. Somebody let me know. I didn't see him in the lineup and didn't think about checking on that since he had left the game the previous series. But Draymond Jones, one of the great defensive linemen in the country. Chase Young was playing out of his mind when he wasn't committing fouls. He had the one and almost had two. But fortunately, the refs made the right call on the second play and picked up the flag. So, yeah, the 4th and 5 is just running for 5 yards against that defensive front. It's just, I really can't explain that. Can't really explain that. All right. Dwayne Haskins is the GOAT. I don't know for anybody who's making that statement what they were thinking of Dwayne Haskins at halftime. I was somewhat defending him. I did think he played a poor first half, but he was let down by drops and he was let down by his offensive line. And I said the one thing that I would work on if I was the Ohio State coaching staff and Ryan Day in particular with Dwayne Haskins would be, let's get you moving in the pocket and throwing off the platform, because when you're off the platform, we see the percentage go way down. Now, that's true to a certain extent with any quarterback, that they don't throw quite as well off the platform. I'm not talking about on the run. I'm talking about off the platform, needing to move in the pocket and then make the throw. And for some reason, he must just have been in the flow of the game, because those kind of throws he was making. And the classic and the best example of those was, of course, the Benjamin Victor catch, in which Haskins dodged around in the pocket, and then he was drifting off to his right, and he was getting belted, and he threw that where he needed to. It was a touch pass with just enough velocity, and Victor made a really great catch. And Benjamin Victor, I have been a critic of, because he's made a lot of lame plays, not won the 50-50 toss-up balls that he needs to win, that he was brought to Ohio State to win in the past, and he did it right there. And then, of course, he found the open field. The downfield blocking by the wide receivers on that play to Benjamin Victor was exceptional. And, of course, he scored. And they scored in 3 plays, 70 yards, and $115. Tucker Phillips, they outplayed us for 52 minutes, pretty much. Penn State outplayed Ohio State for 28 minutes of the first half, excluding the tough Borland forced fumble. Draymond Jones recovers it, and then the J.K. Dobbins play to score the touchdown. But other than that, yes, generally Penn State outplayed Ohio State for 27 or 28 minutes of the first half, and then the Buckeyes outplayed them for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, maybe more than that, because they did have a few defensive stops where they played really well on defense in the third quarter, for most of the third quarter, and got the touchdown to take the lead 14-13. And then from like late third quarter to 8 minutes to play, Penn State again took control with the 2 drives and the defensive stops. And then the Buckeyes just blasted them in the last 8 minutes. Kind of familiar to the TCU game. Up early, 10-0, down 21-13. Then they blasted their way to the win. NCIS Fanatic 21. I know what Joe Moorhead would have done. He would have lost to Florida. And I did make a comment during the game, the Florida-Mississippi State game, that the Joe Moorhead offense doesn't work quite as well without Saquon, McSorley, and company at Penn State. Mississippi State putrid on offense today. 2 measly field goals, and they didn't reach the end zone. And Nick Fitzgerald, I don't like to criticize college players, but I will just say that I have done a number of SEC segments with some of my SEC colleagues, and they have always rated Nick Fitzgerald much higher than I have. I have never seen really where he's an outstanding quarterback. He's good. He's fine. Not a great passer, not a good passer, a decent runner, a good runner. Much better than average. Not Michael Vick good, but Nick Fitzgerald and the Bulldogs having their issues, scoring 7 and 6 the last 2 weeks against really good defenses, but not great defenses. But they only scored 6 today against Florida, 2 field goals, and 7 last week, 1 touchdown on the opening drive at Kentucky. And Mississippi State, the team that was supposed to be the dark horse team to possibly challenge in the SEC Western Division, they've lost the last 2 weeks, and they haven't even seen LSU, Auburn, or Alabama yet, or Texas A&M. Green Man quoting Dwayne Haskins, God has his hands on me. I was made for this. Jay, Haskins proved he needs to grow more before the NFL. Dennis on the feed as well. Mike Escobar, go Notre Dame. Mike, tremendous effort. So for anybody that watched the Notre Dame game, please call. Let us know what you thought of the Irish. Obviously, they were impressive. I only saw about 15 or 20 plays. 860-325-3625. 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687. Also, my media contributors, I don't think they're quite getting the deal. So what I've done over the last couple of weeks, instead of scheduling them specifically, I've said that's too much to schedule. I had 107 media guests in 2017. I've added many more this year. So it's ridiculous to try to track them down and schedule them. I have told them over and over and over that I would basically just do a live stream, send out a blast with a link, and they could respond to it on LinkedIn, Facebook, or on Twitter. And then they would be able to join the chat and talk about their team and talk about their game. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, man, I called last week. This is Reasonable Gump, Alabama fan. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. You guys had a rough one today.
Tell you what, man, we almost didn't make it out of that alive.
Oh, we're talking about the Ohio State game. I was joking a little bit on the Crimson Tide there. Yeah, that was a heart stopper.
Speaking of the Ohio State game, I just logged on, so I don't know if you guys have talked about this. You probably have. But what in the world was that last play call supposed to be that Penn State made on the 4th and 5? I mean, you had the little chess match going on there with all the timeouts and stuff. I thought they were going to work out something really, shifty, clever. And then they just hand the ball off like that, just try and pound it. I think they actually lost yards on the play.
Yep. So Reasonable Gump, I will answer that by saying the same thing I said a few minutes ago, and that's that I think it was just overthought. So play callers sometimes think they're a little bit smarter and don't go with the obvious. So the obvious to me is that the biggest gamer on the field is Trace McSorley for either team. Maybe he's not the most talented, maybe he's not the best NFL prospect, but he is a gamer. So you got to trust him. He has led this team to a Rose Bowl, a Big Ten championship, Fiesta Bowl win. He has been your guy for 3 years, and he desperately wants to win a championship. And he played an exceptional game. And in addition to that, he's the type quarterback, unlike Haskins, as you well know, that can beat you with his arm and his legs. So you give him that option. You roll him out and you send out 2 receivers on that side of the field and you give him the option. And if the field opens up, then he's got the option to run. And if he scrambles and the defense draws to him, then he's most likely going to have somebody open. But most likely he's going to make the right decision. That guy, not trying to run 5 yards, especially handing the ball in the backfield 3 yards back. So you've got to gain 8 or 9 yards against one of the best defensive fronts in the country. Yeah, it made no sense.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious as to what your comment about Haskins. So I'm going to go back to that, but I just want everyone to listen to me, just for a minute here. This is exactly what I called and talked about with you briefly last week when Alabama it was 1st and 20 inside their own red zone. They handed it off twice and then tried a little screen shovel pass and did nothing. All right, this is exactly what happens when you do not trust your proven quarterback. Trace McSorley is a proven quarterback, just like everything you just said. He's led them to a Big Ten championship. He's led them to a really good year last year, and they're doing real well right now. I think he broke the Penn State rushing record tonight.
Yes.
All right. And he's got a great arm too. This is exactly what happens when you don't just trust your quarterback and let him make a play. This is what Oklahoma did all last year. When they were down and they needed something to happen, they gave it to Baker Mayfield. All ironically until the Rose Bowl when they actually did what we're talking about now and they tried to hand it off. But in this situation, 4th and 5, and that was it. That was the game. I mean, even if you don't want to try just a straight up pass, or if you want to do something a little, razzle-dazzle, shifty kind of action, throw it over here, then back across the field, do something. But you got to let the quarterback do more than take a snap and just hand the ball off. I thought that was a very strange call. Like you said, maybe they did overthink it, and they thought Ohio State was going to try and cover all the pass routes, but they didn't. They brought pressure, and it paid off. That was a good game. I got to say, I'm impressed. I actually thought Penn State was going to win going into this. I thought and still do think Ohio State is a better team. But I thought with the situation, the whiteout, and all that Penn State was going to pull it out going into this.
So you are explaining something right now, Reasonable Gump, exactly as I have a number of times that people don't necessarily get. I know a number of people do, but unfortunately, a large portion of my audience doesn't get that the best team doesn't always win the game that particular day. So, for example, before the season, I picked Ohio State to go 11-1. I did not state specifically which game they would lose, but I said most likely that game's going to be in Happy Valley, a night game against Penn State, difficult situation, difficult spot. If these two teams played 10 times, I think Ohio State wins 7 or 8 times. They're a better team. They've got a more talented roster. But I picked Penn State to win this game, stating I believe Ohio State's a better team, but I think Penn State's going to win this game. Does it shock me that Ohio State won? Of course not. I think they're a better team, but I did pick Penn State to win the game.
Yeah, and
I would have
done so too. If I made bets.
To your point, now McSorley ripped up the Ohio State defense with 175 yards rushing, but out of the running back position, Penn State ran it 19 times for 31 yards. That's not real good. That's like a yard and a half a carry. But they were going to get 5 on 4th and 5.
I mean, there's no question. Without Trace McSorley on that field, Penn State gets blown out. He was the difference maker, and I hate seeing that. It crushes me really when a coach then all of a sudden in the time when they really need it, when they don't trust their quarterback again, who's proven himself. I'm not talking about a freshman, wild card quarterback. I'm talking about a guy who's proven himself year after year, time and time again, and you don't even let him try to make a play.
Yeah, so let's say
I think it's terrible.
Let's say it's an inverse situation and Ohio State needs to make that play. Number one, they've got a quarterback who's immobile. Number two, they've got a quarterback who's never pulled through in a situation like that, and they have other players like a J.K. Dobbins who's a dynamic player. So maybe you could justify going in another direction. But that's not the case with Penn State. And their wide receivers and tight ends are very trustworthy. Good hands.
Yeah.
They're really good players that were winning one-on-one matchups. Yeah. And there was a comment made after the game, and Herbstreit and Fowler were making the same comment in regards to we really hesitate to criticize the play calling. These guys are really smart. They study the film. They know football. They know it 1,000 times better than I do, regardless of how much I watch. So I rarely go to this degree to criticize play calling. But I just thought it was fairly obvious what you need to do. Now, in terms of the play, the specific play, I don't know. But in terms of the type of option, I think you need to give your best player and your leader, I think it's kind of a run-pass option, whether you roll him out or you do a bootleg or set him up in the pocket, because how many times did he set up in the pocket and find a gap and just take off for the first down? Happened over and over and over and over.
Right. Tell me about Dwayne Haskins this game. I saw that he threw for over 200 yards, but I also saw he made I think 22 out of 39 attempts, so a little bit more than half. So you said he's immobile. So you don't think he can run at all? I'm not. By the way, I have not watched a lot of Ohio State games, so I'm not sure. But I actually thought he was more of a dual threat guy. I'm apparently probably wrong on that.
No, he's not. He's not. Maybe some personal characteristics would make you believe that he should be he would be a dual threat quarterback, but he's not. Mm-hmm. So Dwayne Haskins, his most specific game time in crunch time was, I don't know if you're aware, that he came into the Michigan game last year. Late third quarter, Buckeyes are down by 6. J.T. Barrett gets hurt, leaves the game, and Haskins on the touchdown drive that turned out to be the game winner, and the Buckeyes outscored Michigan 21-0 to close out the game. But they were down 20-14 when he entered the game. He ripped off a 3rd and 18 throw that was like a Drew Brees, Tom Brady, beautiful, through a window of 3 players to convert a 3rd and 18, and he led 2 touchdown drives, and he played really well, hit on 7 of 8 passes. Okay, that's been his introduction to big-time college football on a big stage against a good team in a hostile environment. And then he starts this season, and yeah, you could always see the arm talent. He's a much better passer than J.T. Barrett. He just has more arm talent. He can throw it with more velocity from different arm angles and the whole deal. But yeah, he's not Drew Bledsoe standing back there, or Dan Fouts or somebody like that, but he's not mobile. Now, the one thing that impressed me in this game was, so at halftime, he had thrown for, I think, 30 yards at halftime. He was like 5 for 14 at halftime. He had a miserable first half. Now, the Buckeyes did drop 4 passes at least, blatant drops, plus the offensive line wasn't playing well. So it wasn't just him, but he was not playing well. He came out in the second half, and the thing that he did that impressed me in the second half that he was missing throws on in the first half is he wasn't mobile, like sprinting out away from the rush, but within the pocket, he had to move his feet a lot and step up and throw from different arm slots off of the platform. And he was making those throws in the second half. So it's like he almost developed in front of our eyes because he was missing those throws in the first half, and he started to make those kind of throws in the second half, most notably the score that was the first of the 2 scores in the comeback to Benjamin Victor. That was an exceptional throw. If you watch the replay, he scrambled up in the front of the pocket, then he had to go to his right, and he was getting annihilated. He was getting blasted right in the ribs, and he delivered it on the money for whatever it was, a 35-yard touchdown. So yeah, he's really good, but he's not the runner JT Barrett was. And Barrett wasn't like extremely blazing fast, but he was more than than most quarterbacks. And he was just uncanny with knowing when to run and how to run and set up his blocks. And so that was missing from the Ohio State offense, and it was mentioned on the broadcast a number of times from Herb Street, is that is now missing from the Ohio State offense, and they missed a couple 4th and short plays where it would have been Barrett behind a pulling guard, and they would have just most likely gained the first down, but they didn't have that option. Yeah, it's kind of painful to watch him run out of the pocket. He's slow. Yeah, he's slow.
I'm actually kind of pleased with the result. I guess I don't care that much, but the matchup I do want to see, I think most of America wants to see, is Alabama and Ohio State. So if this increases their chance of both getting to the playoffs, then I'm all for it. I actually kind of thought that even if Ohio State lost this game, that they could still have a really good case for making it like Alabama did last year.
Yeah.
If they went 11-1 and Penn State went on to, win it, because a loss on the road, particularly in that kind of environment, as the committee showed with Alabama, they're more willing to forgive that. So, particularly to a top 10 team like Penn State. But I mean, it's a moot point now. Ohio State won. I don't see Ohio State losing a game. I know you and I both know it's extremely difficult to go undefeated. Every team's gonna have that game where they just show up and they're just rolled out of bed and they're just trying to halfway through it the whole time. But
when is Alabama gonna have that game?
Taking a quick scan of the schedule might be. You know what? I was about to say Mississippi State, but after the egg I saw them late on, I'm not even going to say that.
Their offense is a mess. This has been 2 weeks in a row.
It was gross, man. The Missouri maybe is the one that they kind of show up and try to sleepwalk through. That's the only one I can think of. They're not going to mess up against Arkansas. I can tell you that. So, and I think they're both going to be ready for. I think Alabama's going to be ready for LSU and Auburn. I don't think they're going to go into those with any kind of get caught looking ahead or something.
Do you remember, Reasonable Gump, in 2014? Well, I know you remember the game when Ohio State beat Alabama in the playoff. So it's unreasonable right now to make a conversation out of who's better all-time, Urban Meyer or Nick Saban. It's Saban. He's got the 6 national championships. But at that time, he had 2 less. And then Meyer beat him head-to-head and won the national championship. And there was all this talk. Urban Meyer is probably superseded Nick Saban on the all-time coaching scale. We could possibly have that as another storyline in all this, because I was talking to another Alabama fan about this earlier today who brought up the Saban-Meyer legacy of, battleground matchups that they've had with Florida and now possibly Ohio State again, and how epic that's been. And that kind of plays into this is the game that America wants to see, because it's more than just the probably the two most talented teams in the country, but it's the history, the tradition of arguably the two most storied programs in college football, or certainly two of the top 4 or 5, and two coaching greats, and it just reeks of tradition and two just behemoths of powerhouses in college football history.
Yeah. I was agreeing with everything you were saying. Definitely at the end there. If I had to rank top 5 story programs, it would be Alabama, probably Notre Dame second, Ohio State a very close third. Then then I had to start stretching a little bit, but maybe USC, and I had to kind of look for the last one, maybe Oklahoma. But I'm glad you brought that game up, though. You see, a lot of people, everyone knows that Ohio State won, but a lot of people, for some reason, I don't know why, but a lot of people try to look back on it and say that was a game where Alabama was quote unquote dominated.
No,
and it wasn't. It came down to the last possession.
Yep.
We actually, I think Blake Sims was throwing it into the end zone, so we had a real good chance to win it. But yeah, and they say, and they use that as an example. Urban Meyer passed him because head to head, it looks like he's better. And I was like, hold on a second. Let's not forget when he was at Florida. All right, all in all, head to head matchups, they're 2-2. Urban Meyer beat him in 2008 when he had Tim Tebow. Saban came back and beat him in 2009. Both of those were SEC championships. Then the next year, 2010, everyone always forgets this one. In 2010, Florida and Alabama played in the regular season, and Florida got throttled. I think it was 30-3 or something. And then the most recent one was obviously the one in 2014. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, you made your point. Definitely, people just think of the championship games, but if you're just talking about head to head, yeah, they forget about the 2010 team that, of course, Alabama. That was one of the head scratchers that they lost 3 games, and then they took it out on poor Michigan State in the Capital One Bowl and just annihilated them. And they were a really good team. That's how talented Alabama is year to year. That when they get motivated and get a little bit embarrassed by not being in the national championship situation, they go out there and blast a top 10 team like 49-7. But the thing about that game was, this is how consistently good Alabama has been. This kind of amazes me, even in defeat. That Ohio State team was one of the most talented teams you're going to see on a college football field. That draft class 2 years later, they were just loaded with sophomores.
Astounding.
Yes. Yeah. It was just, and they barely eked out a win. Yes.
And I might add, I know this has been kind of Alabama's legacy, but let's not forget, Alabama went into that playoff with Blake Sims, a quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Now, he did use his weapons. He had a prolific season statistically. I understand he's not in the NFL today, so he wasn't that talented, and he had to sit around campus for 4 years to finally win the job. So obviously that all speaks to him being an overachiever. So that's to your point. But because of Amari Cooper and Lane Kiffin calling the plays, and they had a really dynamic offense, and maybe if they would have stuck with Derrick Henry running the ball in the second half, they might have won that game.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
I consider that one of the reasons that Derrick Henry. I consider that one of the reasons that we didn't come on top of that game. Is I'm not even sure if Derrick Henry played at all. If he did, he didn't play very much. But going into that game, apparently Derrick Henry pissed Saban off. He was being an asshole in practice, and so Saban benched him. He wasn't letting him start with run. He wasn't letting him get the handoffs that a lot of fans would have liked him to. And he was obviously our best running back. And so if anyone wants to, a lot of people say like the best players or like the star players on the team, like Baker Mayfield and his off-field antics last year, that they should just get a pass because the team needs them to play. Well, that's why I think respectable coaches, if they have players that for some reason are considering themselves above the law, like they can get away with, bad-mouthing a coach or talking back or misbehaving and stuff, a respectable coach is going to treat him like no one else, or like no one's different. And so Derrick Henry didn't get the play time in that game.
So I pulled up the box. I pulled up the box score, but I haven't looked at it yet because I love kind of challenging myself. If I remember correctly, there was a point in the second half when Alabama was, when it was a tussle. Of course, as you know, Alabama went up 21-6, and then Ohio State came back, and then they took a 2-touchdown lead. There was a point in the second half in which Alabama gave the ball to Derrick Henry 3 or 4 times, and he was just knocking guys out of the way, just steamrolling on a couple drives. And then Alabama started going pass happy, and I was like, just feeling good about that. I'm guessing he carried the ball like 10 times for 75 yards in that game. That's going to be my guess. Derrick Henry went 13 carries for 95 yards, 7.3 per carry.
The following years when he was getting 20-plus carries a game.
Sure. So 7.3 against that defense. Not bad. Yeah, so we'll see if the two get together this year. Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Real quick, I wanted to get your opinion on the. I saw you made videos about it. I haven't watched them yet, but your opinion on the Dabo Swinney taken out, or just not taken out, but putting Trevor Lawrence in earlier this week, saying he was a starter, and then Kelly Bryant immediately saying, "Okay, well then peace out. I don't want to be here." And then, sure enough, what happened? The guy gets injured on the first game he starts, and now there's no backup. Clemson scraped by. They escaped an upset there, but I think it's interesting and a little bit comical that at the beginning of the year, everyone was looking at the quote-unquote Alabama quarterback situation. We're not the one with the bad quarterback situation now, I can tell you that much.
You probably should address one of your fellow Alabama fans in the chat who says Ohio State doesn't play anyone. But anyway, I'll get to your question. So I don't want to take full credit for this explanation of my thoughts because certainly I had my own perspective and thoughts when I first heard the news and kind of processed it. But at the same time, I talked to so many people, and I think, and this typically happens, where I've got my perspective and then I hear somebody else chime in and I think, okay, well, they've got some good points as well. That makes total sense. So this is kind of what I've gathered and based on my initial impressions, but then also in having a few conversations with some people that certainly had interesting perspectives on it, which is very close to what you just stated. So we can almost liken it to what happened with Alabama last season, in which Nick Saban, for whatever reason, kept Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback, even though he knew Tua was decidedly the better player. So was he protecting against injury? Was he protecting Jalen's reputation? Was he just being loyal to a guy that was 27-2 that, if not for Deshaun Watson, would have had a national championship ring? I think maybe there's a combination of a lot of things working there. So Dabo Swinney didn't necessarily go that full route. And I had speculated the entire offseason, especially before this freshman redshirt rule or the redshirt rule was instituted, that that I could see it playing out, that Clemson's going to be 8-0, 9-0, something in that range. And Dabo Swinney's going to look at his offense and think, we're winning these games 27-10 against bad teams, and my offense isn't what it needs to be. Sure, I'm going to win the ACC, but once I get to the playoff and I start looking at some of these other teams, the same thing that happened last year is going to happen this year. So do I pull the trigger? Do I go conservative and say, let's just grind it out with Kelly Bryant, hope he can make some plays, hope the defense is good enough and all the other components? Or do I make the bold move and say, no, it's not good enough and it's not going to be good enough? I thought this was going to happen 8 or 9 weeks deep. But he looked out for the young man and gave him an option to move on. And that's why I find it interesting that Dabo Swinney made the statement today that it never crossed his mind. And this guy has been nothing, as far as I know, but honest in the past. So he seems like an upstanding guy, and he has no obligation to be honest with the media or the public. But at the same time, I find it difficult to believe that it's this coincidental that he decided at this point to make this decision, and that he never considered that Kelly Bryant would ever transfer. I find that hard to believe, that he wouldn't think, okay, I've got a senior quarterback, and I'm going to let him know that he's no longer the quarterback for one of the best football teams in America. And this is why he stuck around for all this time, was to quarterback this team, and I'm taking it out from under his control, but there's no way he's going to transfer. That didn't cross his mind. So I don't think that he handled it, and it's easy to sit here. We don't know the dynamics of the locker room, how much he would lose the team. I thought maybe I explained it a little bit better earlier today, but in regards to, we can look at the logistics of the situation from the outside, but these guys have to be master psychologists as well, and have a beat on their team as well, and their locker room, and know their leadership within the locker room. And I think it's pretty strong there at Clemson. I think Dabo Swinney has pretty much built a culture that's at the top of the list in college football for a new school coach, not Saban or Meyer. And so I think they will generally trust the decision maker. So he's got enough equity with his team that he probably didn't lose them. I don't think he lost his team, but I think he could have gotten by with the way he was playing it out. The way he was playing it out was Kelly Bryant was playing well enough to perform pretty well. They were scoring enough points. He was getting Trevor Lawrence in there for enough snaps and enough reps, like Tua last year, with like 75 pass attempts during the regular season, to bring him along, give him those reps. When he needs a passing quarterback, he kind of favors Trevor, and he takes him into the playoffs in that manner. And when he needs Trevor Lawrence, he goes that route. I think it was all displayed right in front of him last year, and he should have taken that cue.
Okay, I'm going to respond to this in two parts.
Sure.
First, just so I don't forget. I'm going to respond to the Alabama fan in the comment. By the way, I don't watch the comments or the show when I'm talking because there's a delay. So if there's anything anyone says that you think I should respond to, just go ahead and tell me. But as far as the person, whoever it is, that said Ohio State doesn't play anyone, just stop it. All right, just stop. Look, I get it that Ohio State pretends to play non-conference Power 5 teams by scheduling Oregon State. I get it. I don't really consider that a real non-Power 5, so I think it is hypocritical when teams accuse Alabama of making weak schedules. But Ohio State plays Penn State, a top 10 team. By the time they play Michigan, they may very well be a top 10, top 15 team then too. 2 wins like that is more than enough to satisfy me. Alabama is no different. We're going to play LSU. Most likely will be a top 10 team, depending on how bad if they win or lose to Georgia. And then Auburn should at least be ranked hopefully will be ranked by the time we get them. We're both going to play power teams in our respective championship games. So yeah, just stop it. Ohio State's schedule is plenty good enough to get them in the playoffs if they do their job. They did not do their job last year, but that's a different topic. As far as the Clemson thing, so here's my thoughts on it. I'm kind of yes and no when it comes to Dabo's decision. Yes, I fully agree that you need to play the best player. You need to play the guy that gives you the best chance of winning. I don't blame him at all for that. Everyone can see Trevor Lawrence is a better player, better quarterback. They say he's already ready for the NFL, which I think is dumb. But yeah, regardless, he's a great quarterback, and he probably will give him a better shot at winning a playoff game or two. Here's why the decision to go ahead and name him the starter beginning of week 5 was dumb, in my opinion. Because if Clemson could have sleptwalked through the ACC with Kelly Bryant leading the charge. They just could have. Their schedule is just that easy.
Yep.
You could easily, and you could have had Kelly Bryant take you through the ACC, through a 12-0 run to the ACC, blow out Miami again in the championship. And that's a coach who lets a senior starting quarterback do that. That's giving him a complete season. I mean, you would know, you would not be able to feel. No one should feel guilty, depending on what happens later on, if they let their guy do that. Come out to the playoff game. Dabo's most likely thinking he's not going to beat. Let's just say it. He's looking at Alabama. He's not going to beat Alabama with Kelly Bryant. Okay, you go out in the first quarter. Let's say you go down. Let's say it's not working. You're down by 10 points. Go ahead and make the switch to Trevor Lawrence. You've given him time. You've rotated them in and out the entire year. It's not like he's, only played garbage time. He'll have plenty of experience, and you can switch him out then without being disloyal to Kelly Bryant. I don't think that would be disloyal at all if you gave him the starting job for the entire season. I think it was dumb for him to just go ahead and make the bold move, like you said, to just go ahead and name Trevor Lawrence starter, because then you're down to one quarterback. And don't give me this I'm not directing this at you. I'm directing it at Dabo. Don't give me this nonsense about how you never thought the guy would transfer. All right, well, what is he supposed to do? You got up to the redshirt year. You're telling him he's going to have to sit on the bench now for the rest of his college career, because this is it. This is last year. He didn't take a red shirt. Of course he's going to transfer. And right now, he's not going to stay around on the very chance that Trevor gets an injury and needs to sit out for a couple snaps or something. You're going to send him out there in his backup job, and all of a sudden he's done. His whole college career is done if that happens. So no, don't try and tell me that you didn't see this coming. I think Dabo went all in. He pushed all his chips on the table. And depending on, I don't know how serious his injury is. I mean, he walked off the field on his own, so maybe it's not that bad. But I think that was a huge risk. When you don't have anyone behind him, I think that was not a good move. I think if you would have kept Kelly Bryant as a starter, you would have still had Trevor Lawrence there, because he's not going anywhere. Kelly Bryant's gone after this year, because no matter what. So Trevor Lawrence doesn't have any reason to transfer. He knows he's got the job next year already. So you get to keep him. You get to keep both of them there, if you do it that way, without being disloyal to Kelly Bryant. That's my take on the Clemson quarterback situation.
Yeah, and it's a good take. It seems reasonable. We don't know everything that goes on, but from the outside, we can pretty much see what the setup is from a logistical standpoint, and know all the ramifications of the decisions that were made. Yeah, he's put his football team in a precarious situation by not anticipating and not knowing a young man that's been in his program now for 4 to 5 years well enough to know what decision he was going to make. If he in fact didn't know that, he probably should have tested the waters and had those conversations beforehand to know, okay, I can't leave myself exposed with a freshman quarterback for the rest of the season, and that's all I have. But that's what he's done.
That's what he did, and he's going to reap what he sowed. I don't wish injuries on anyone. I hope the guy's going to be able to come back pretty soon and play out the rest of the season. But at the same time, I was kind of pulling for Syracuse, because it would have been like the ultimate lesson right off the bat of why that was a bad decision.
I was pulling for Syracuse just because I like upsets, and it would have been fun. And very early on, I saw that I was safe with Syracuse in 25 points. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen the upsets. Just because if you look at the beginning of the season and the way things expected to play out and still may, the only thing I didn't like about this season, and for as long as we wait for college football to finally be here, is that I saw Ohio State and Wisconsin in the Big Ten, Alabama and Georgia in the SEC, Clemson and Miami in the ACC, Oklahoma in the Big 12, Washington in the Pac-12. And I thought, isn't anybody going to shake this up? And we're seeing rumblings of it possibly in the ACC Coastal Division with some teams challenging possibly Miami. I don't see much that could change in the SEC unless LSU continues to play this well and maybe challenges Alabama. But man, wouldn't it be fun if Clemson would have lost that game, and maybe their reign on that division would have been a little more precarious. Still, most likely they would have just lost the one game like they have the past few seasons and been fine. But at least with an early season loss, it would have made things a little bit more interesting because, man, cut and dry, they're the one team in the nation that seems destined to wrap things up in their conference.
I think everyone said it. That'd be most shocking. Not the team to not, if they didn't make the playoffs, would be Clemson. I mean, they're not. I don't think no one's saying it's because of the best team in the nation. It's because they don't. There's no one on their schedule. Toughest team on their schedule is Texas A&M, who almost lost to Arkansas. Not almost lost.
Yeah,
but they were
sure.
They were giving them a close game. So, no, I just thought it'd be funny. I think it's funny when the same head-scratching upset to an unranked team happens twice in a row. Like the Texas and Maryland one just made I was laughing all night about that one a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, because we figure
Syracuse again.
Because it's logical and feasible to think that is Texas and Clemson, not only are they more talented, not only are they better, but now they've got a revenge factor. And haven't they been waiting all this time to just unleash their anger on this poor team? But it didn't happen with Texas, Maryland. And man, Syracuse looked the part. You know, they looked like they were comfortable and they were fighting for that game. And Trevor Lawrence or no Trevor Lawrence, they were right there with them.
Yeah, but it didn't happen now. But hey, it is getting interesting in the SEC. You mentioned Kentucky blew out South Carolina. Florida won Mississippi State. So the East is actually looking pretty strong right now. I don't know if Florida's going to be ranked or if they should be after this game, but Kentucky is definitely, I think, the most interesting team right now in the SEC. Everyone knows what Alabama's doing. Yeah. Everyone knows what Georgia should do. Yep. But I think the most interesting team is Kentucky.
Yeah, it's not like Kentucky's cleared one hurdle. So it was from a historic standpoint and from the standpoint of them getting past that Florida jinx. Oh, that was cute. They finally beat Florida. Okay, they did that. Then they come home. And they take on a Mississippi State, who's another double-digit favorite against them. And they only give up a touchdown, and they blow them out. And now they've done it against three decent opponents. Another Eastern Division team that's supposed to be better than them coming into the season. Now they've beaten three teams that were supposed to be better than them. So... and they do it throwing like 12 passes a game. That's amazing to me.
It is.
They give the ball to Snell like 25 or 28 times, and Terry Wilson throws it like 11. And nobody's figured this out on defense yet.
Wasn't Ohio State trying to recruit Snell? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, they were. They did recruit him. Absolutely.
I guess he figured he would start right away at Kentucky. The only reason I can think of that you would choose Kentucky over Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what class he was in. Although Kentucky's done, as you probably know, they've done rather well going to Ohio, Pennsylvania. They're the one SEC team, obviously, where they're located that tends to go just as much north as they go south. And with the plethora of talent in the South, where the South dominates, obviously, the one northern region that is somewhat comparable would be Ohio and Pennsylvania, and they've gone there for a lot of talent.
Both of which, by the way, house really great recruiters. It's a double whammy for James Franklin, depending, whether or not people want to think of how he coaches, but the guy knows not only Pennsylvania, he knows Tennessee recruiting lines. I mean, Tennessee isn't a great talent state, but it's got some. And he coached at Vanderbilt and built them up pretty good when he was there. So Kentucky's got their work cut out for them. And hey, you got to give these guys credit. I know we've only played 5 games, but when's the last time Kentucky's been 5-0?
They hadn't been 2-0 in the SEC, and that was obviously prior to the South Carolina game since 1977.
mean, so I rest my case.
Exactly.
They're the most interesting team.
Oh, I think so too. I think it's fascinating. I want to see it's if they can stay unscathed, which I know that they've got a couple more interesting games. Texas A&M, I believe, is coming up next week. That's going to be difficult to get by, and it might be on the road. But still, they're even if they lose a game, they're going to go into Georgia, or Georgia has to come to them, and it's going to be for the SEC East at that point. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know I've been on a while, so I know a lot of guys probably want to get the call. I'm just going to I just want to ask you one time, since you're an Ohio State fan, what are you thinking about the Michigan game coming up? Because I got to be honest, I've never been a buyer in Jim Harbaugh, and I haven't been proven wrong yet. So just real quickly, tell me how do you think Ohio State's going to stack up against them?
So I think
what you've seen so far.
I'm actually a defender of Jim Harbaugh to a certain extent. Now, if he continues to churn out 8-4 seasons, one more is going to put him, in my book, on what should be the hot seat. But because of his contract and because he's beloved there, I think he's going to get a year or two more than most coaches would get. Now, the reason I defend Jim Harbaugh, it has more to do with what he's accomplished in other stops. I just think he's been able to pull this off in so many stops. There has to be something of substance there. San Diego, Stanford, the San Francisco 49ers. It's amazing what he has turned those programs into at every stop. Now at Michigan, let's understand that they won 5 games the year before he started. So as soon as he stepped on campus, they won 10 games and finished in the top 10. And we all thought, there you go, he's doing it again. And then the next year they won 10 games again. And of course they came within, I'm holding my fingers about an inch apart from winning the Big Ten championship on the measurement against Ohio State. Otherwise, they go to the Big Ten championship game. They're a prohibitive favorite, and most likely they go to the playoff in 2016. So I know that's all ifs, ands, and buts. At the same time, he can't block the players on the field and catch the passes. And so if you put, as a coach, your team in position to win a championship game, which that was a de facto championship game against Ohio State, I think he did his job that season. They were in position to be the best team in the Big Ten. The real disappointment was last year. And people that really know Michigan football knows that the roster took a dip last year. They were very senior laden the season before, which set them up to almost make the playoff. They didn't get it done, and then they were going to take a dip, but people just thought the ascension was just going to continue, people that didn't know the roster. But I talked to a lot of Michigan people. They warned me that 2017 was going to be a dip. And sure enough, they couldn't beat the good teams. They beat all the bad teams. They couldn't beat the good teams. And so here we are. They come out against Notre Dame.
I need to ask you real quick. I don't know.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Yep.
But I need to ask you. Everyone tries to say that the reason he hasn't, blown the doors off yet is because he didn't have the right quarterback.
Yes, now he does.
I know there were injuries
most
last
likely.
year, but isn't that kind of his job to go out and get the right quarterback? I mean, and a college coach, that is their job. NFL coaches don't have to recruit. College coaches do.
As long as any coach has the resources and the money, yeah, they have nobody to blame. They can't point to the guy in the front office and say, he didn't get me the players. Yeah, they're responsible for both. Either they're not getting the players that are good enough, or they're not developing the players or allowing them to develop to their talent. So yeah, they have as long as they're making the kind of money that Jim Harbaugh is and have the resources that he does at Michigan, yeah, he's got nobody to blame. I'm just saying one bad season or disappointing season shouldn't be enough to have this narrative be his narrative at Michigan. I think we could look at a number of highly successful coaches down through the years on both levels and see where in a second or third or fourth season they had a bad season, or again, he went 8-4. He didn't go 4-8, but where they had a bad season and they were still able to rebound and have a big career and accomplish what they were expected to accomplish.
I don't think it's necessarily the bad or the not bad seasons. You're right. 10 games, winning 10 games is not a bad season. I really think it's honestly the record, the 1-5 record against the rivals, and the not making playoffs. Particularly the rival one, though, is the one that people are focusing on. Is that if you ask a Michigan fan, what's more important to you, having a coach who has record-breaking, jobs at Stanford and in the NFL and all that? What's more important to you, that or beating Ohio State or Michigan State? And they really can't do either one of those things. Have not been able to. I think that's the one. I think that's the thing everyone's kind of focusing on. Maybe too much. Maybe too much, but I really think that's the main reason. If you just look at his record of run, you're right. Multiple 10-win seasons is nothing to stick your nose up at.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's emphasized too much. That if you're at Alabama, you got to beat Auburn. You got to win the division. You got to go to the SEC championship game. Well, Alabama's a bad example, but at most powers. At most, you just have to win the national championship. I should have stopped there. But at most powers, at USC, you got to win the Pac-12. And, of course, they expect more. But my point being, I don't think that the criteria of beating Ohio State and Michigan State is wrong. I don't think it's emphasized too much. I just think the sample size is too small. If his punter catches the ball, and even if he just falls on it, like, this is what I'm talking about. Jim Harbaugh can't control everything. You understand that the officials could have measured the Ohio State spot and could have said, JT Barrett didn't make it. Michigan wins the Big Ten East. They're going to the championship game, and most likely they beat Wisconsin.
I forget. Did they not bring the chains out and measure it?
They brought the chains out. Yeah, but
okay, yeah. I actually thought it was a good spot. To be honest, I know I just pissed off all of your all your people in the comment section, but I thought it was a good spot, honestly. And to be honest, even if it wasn't, Michigan did not have to part the Red Sea. And I don't know, was it JT Barrett or a running back that just walked into the end zone the very next play?
Curtis
Michigan
Samuel.
Didn't have
Correct.
To let him do that.
So. Absolutely not. They still had the game to win. They could still have won the game. That is correct. So the point being that regardless of whether the spot was good or not, it was that close. That's what I'm saying. Right. Maybe the spot was fine, but it was that close. Just like the season before, it would have been in 2015. Not only did the punter, not only did he not catch the football, he could have just, there was no time on the clock. He could have just dropped to a knee and just huddled around the ball and the game's over. But he decided to pick it up and hurl it up in the air. So I'm just saying he came that close to winning 2 division championships. He can't control those things. So I would just like to see it play out just a little bit more. And if we're sitting here in 2 years and Jim Harbaugh went 8-4 in 2018 and he's working on another 8-4, I will be right on board with you to say, for as much money as they're paying him and the expectation he has at Michigan, he's not at Maryland, to win at Michigan, you've got to win Big Ten championships and go to playoffs on occasion, meaning you got to win the Big Ten 2 out of 5 years. You've got to be in the hunt in the top 10 almost every year. That's what he was paid to do, and that's what he needs to deliver. So if we're having this conversation 2 years from now, even next year, if they're sitting here 4-2 this time next year after going 8-4 this year, I'll say, you know what? Yeah, he's not getting it done. I just don't think the sample size, considering, it's not like his teams have lost to Michigan and State and Ohio State, 31-7 every time they've hit the field, and they're unprepared and they've just gotten outclassed. He hasn't had those kind of games against those 2 teams. You probably didn't see the Ohio State-Michigan game, but even Ohio State people would tell you that if they had 50 other quarterbacks in the nation not named John O'Corn, that they would have beaten Ohio State last year. He was that awful. And that's, yes. And to your point, that's his responsibility. They brought in that kid from Houston. He had a nice season as a freshman at Houston, threw 28 touchdown passes. But between his trip from Houston to Ann Arbor, he forgot how to throw the ball or something. He was just awful last year. But you're right. At this point, his first year there was 2015. 2015. So he had the recruiting class signed in 2015. Although that was kind of a rush job. So he has his team pretty much on the field. So he better have a quarterback. And now he's been gifted one from Ole Miss. He can thank Hugh Freeze for his quarterback this season. And he's got a good one. And they're not tearing it up right now. They looked bad in week 1 against Notre Dame offensively. And today I watched them play Northwestern. They were playing Northwestern. They scored 20 points. So, you know, it's continuing. He's not turning around this narrative too quickly. So I might be right there with you.
I'm honestly kind of thinking that he got Shea Patterson not because he wanted to get out of Ole Miss, but because he was beaten out of Ole Miss. I think the quarterback they got right now down, I don't know his name from Hawaii, but
Tamu.
I think
you might be right.
Yeah, Tamu.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might be even better, honestly. So. But yeah. So just this year, I think Ohio State. You get them at home, right? I think you should roll over them by 20+ points. The way it's looking right now.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those games. You know what the deal is. Alabama, Auburn. Yeah, they have. If you go down through the years since Ohio State's been dominant in this series, yeah, they've had those years when. Some of the Jim Tressel teams and Urban Meyer a couple times have just rolled over them, and then they've had the close wins. But since 2003, take out the Luke Fickell year. This is amazing. 2003, take out the Luke Fickell year. Meyer and Tressel have not lost to Michigan. They've won all those games. It's crazy. It's crazy.
They haven't. You said you said take out 1 year, because I thought there was 1 year since then that Michigan did win. I thought.
All right. So Urban Meyer's undefeated against Michigan, so that takes us to 2012. Right. 2011 was the Luke Fickell year, in between Tressel and Meyer. Tressel, yeah, he beat him in 04, 05, 06, 07, 8, 9, and 10. The last time they lost to Michigan was in 2003, other than the Luke Fickell season.
2003, so would have been 15 straight games, if not for the whole.
Yep.
Tressel getting fired.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have.
That's quite a run. That's the way Alabama and Auburn used to be.
Oh, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, people don't think about Tommy Tuberville's run being that great, or don't. He doesn't readily come to mind. But my goodness, if we would have had a playoff back in 2004, of course, he would have had his Auburn team right there, and they were great. Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown, and I'm trying to think of the quarterback's name. Jay played for the Redskins. Shoot. Anyway. I won't come up with it right now, but he went to the Redskins. But Tommy Tuberville, he had a nice record against Alabama. He's been one of the few, maybe the only in recent times.
Yeah.
Six.
Alabama 6 times in a row.
Yeah.
It finally ended in 2008. 6 times in a row. I think our longest streak against them is 9. So. We still hold the edge in that one. I think we have about 9 to 10 more victories overall than Auburn, but
that's all it is.
Yeah, surprising. Well, you got to think about it like this: Alabama and Auburn, unlike a lot of other SEC rivalries, the entire the whole number of every meeting is not as high as you might think, because
that's right.
We actually didn't play between like 1903 or something all the way to like 1946.
That's right. Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah, there's a huge gap, almost half a century. So yeah, that's why. But since then, yeah, Alabama's. I won't say it's dominated the series, but they definitely do have the edge.
Sure.
The most lopsided series, I think, is against Mississippi State. I think we've won like 90 and they've won 18. So,
absolutely.
anyway, man, hey, I know it's been on a while. You probably got other people who want to call in, so I'm going to go ahead and wish you good night.
I appreciate it.
And, hopefully, all right, man.
Good to have you on. Thanks for the discussion. Reasonable Gump. It's good to talk to any college football fan that's an avid fan for his particular team, but still level-headed, looks at the whole scene, understands that there are other programs that have great traditions and have great coaching and talent. That's good to hear. All right, I'm going to look at the live chat. I'm going to keep the phones open for a few more minutes or for as long as you guys want to talk. And otherwise, what else do I have to talk about? Again, what I was explaining when Reasonable Gump called is that I have explained to all my media guests, I thought I was being very clear. I said, I am no longer scheduling any of you specifically for a time. 8 o'clock Thursday night, 7:30 Wednesday. I've got a call coming in. Hang on just a second. When we get a regular phone line and I can put these people on hold, then I can finish my point.
The call will start.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
It's Chris Harris again. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Chris. What's going on?
I was wanting to talk to you about tonight's game.
All right.
First off, I'd like to say Penn State has all my respect. If James Franklin doesn't go for it in their own territory in the first half and they kick that field goal, I think they win that game. You think the Big Ten East is down to Michigan and Ohio State now?
Well, the way Michigan State's playing, it sure looks like it. Well, let's not count out Penn State. So, of course, Ohio State would have to lose twice to put Penn State back in play. So I understand what you're thinking. I understand the thinking. And Ohio State has an extremely light touch out of the Big Ten Western Division. I think it's Purdue, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Yes.
Yeah.
So no Wisconsin, no Iowa, no trips to Iowa this year. So, yeah, it would seem to be pretty decided there. And actually, Penn State, even though it's going to be at home, they've got difficult visits coming in from Wisconsin and Iowa as well. Michigan State, I was not sold on them. I picked them to go 8-4. They're always going to be a good team, albeit aside from 2016 under Mark D'Antonio. But I didn't buy the whole Michigan State. They've got 20 starters coming back. They just don't recruit at the same level, and typically they're not going to be quite there. So Michigan, I watched most of the Northwestern game today, and boy, they turned
that around.
They turned it around, and I knew that would be a difficult game, and certainly was happy to take the 14.5 points because I knew that was a difficult assignment. But you would just think, I would think Ohio State wouldn't go into Northwestern, into Evanston, and mess around like that, and come out of there with a 20-17 win. You wouldn't think.
I don't think Purdue's going to be an easy game either. What is it? They lost their first 3 games by like 8 points, I believe it was.
They did, and then they routed Boston College, and they took care of Nebraska today on the road, which Nebraska's obviously struggling, but it was in Lincoln, and they beat them by 2 touchdowns. Yep.
Yeah, those first 3 games have gone either way. I think Purdue's a pretty good team, believe it or not.
So you're thinking that Ohio State has this thing wrapped up, or you think Michigan's got a shot?
I think if I see Ohio State losing 2 games, I think it's going to be Michigan and probably Michigan State. But are those games back-to-back?
No, they're not back-to-back. I know that they have done that a number of times, 2015 being the most famous one when Ohio State lost on the last-second field goal to Michigan State and blew the division. This year, they don't have Michigan State. I'll give it a look here real quick. I know it's split up, and they do have to go to East Lansing. So you know as well as I do, even a couple of years ago, going to East Lansing against a 3-9 team, they won that game by 1 point on a missed 2-point conversion. So you just never know when that team's going to show up on that particular week. But, of course, they crushed Michigan State last year. Michigan.
Indiana
Yep.
seems to play us tough too.
Oh
year.
yeah.
I was at the 2015 game, and that was pretty close. And then we pulled away in the fourth quarter, but that game was really close.
Was that the like 21-20? And Jalen Marshall had some big plays in the punt return game, and they won like 35-20 or 42-20, something like that, I think.
Yeah, I believe it was that year.
So Ohio State next plays Indiana. Homecoming. That's at home, obviously. Minnesota, Purdue on the road, as you mentioned. Nebraska, who's really having a rough time. Okay, so they've got the one game between Michigan State on the road, Maryland on the road, Michigan. Yeah, Maryland had the one curious game against Temple where they got blown out by 3 touchdowns. But other than that, they're off to a decent start.
You think Purdue's the trap game for OSU this year?
Well, it sure appeared to be that way during the offseason, and then Purdue gets off to this rough start. But as you say, people have to look past the record. Now, the Eastern Michigan game is a bit curious that they lost that by 1 point. But otherwise, yeah, good game against Northwestern. They beat Boston College as bad as they did. They come back and they win this game. So, yeah, that would appear to be out of those Big Ten Western Division games, the one that could be a little scary. Yeah, Purdue's a scrappy little team. What's that?
So are you sold on Kentucky now?
Oh, I was just talking to another caller, and I let him know that, the Florida win was cute. It broke the 31-year losing streak, but then they bring in Mississippi State as a 10-point favorite, and they hold them to 1 touchdown on the opening drive. Then they take on South Carolina, who was supposed to be the second best team in the division, and they beat them 24-10. So they're not giving up points to people. And I know Florida offensively is really challenged. Mississippi State must be really challenged, something we didn't know, especially with a veteran quarterback, Nick Fitzgerald, Kylan Hill, a really good running back, a revamped wide receiver core, and Joe Moorhead running the offense. We expected Mississippi State to be better, but obviously scoring 13 points in 2 weeks against Kentucky and Florida, they're not. But then Kentucky holds South Carolina to 10 points. They're playing some excellent defense.
Yeah, they are. They are. And Snell is amazing.
He is amazing because I think beyond the stats, we all have to take into consideration that they're only throwing the ball 11 or 12 times a game, and everybody knows he's coming at you 25 or 26 times, and they still can't stop him.
Mm-hmm. You think Notre Dame's got a shot at the playoff this year?
Absolutely, they do. Let's look at Notre Dame's schedule. My goodness, they've cleared most of the hurdles.
They have a lot of good wins. They play USC this year?
Oh, yeah, they do. They've got them at the Coliseum. I think that's the last game of the season.
So far, they've got the Stanford win, the Michigan win, and if they beat USC, they could potentially beat the Pac-12 champion. Those are 3 great wins.
Yes, they could beat the Pac-12 champion, whether it's USC or Stanford, potentially. So Notre Dame, I got the schedule right here. So Notre Dame obviously beat Michigan, and I'm not going to say they were dominant in that game, but clearly the better team. Michigan did have the final possession to try to tie the game, but 24-17. Then they played the game against Ball State, and that's when everybody thought they're really not that good, and Vandy really pushed them. But then they come back with these 2 efforts, and you know what's happened is that they've replaced the quarterback with Ian Book, and they're just a different offense. Man, they really took it to Stanford in the second half tonight.
My one worry with Notre Dame is they're obviously not in a conference. So if Clemson wins out, which I don't think they will, and Alabama wins the SEC, Ohio State wins the Big, and say Oklahoma or West Virginia went out in the Big 12, you think they can get in over any of those teams if they win out?
So what records are you giving to these conference champions?
They all went out, but I don't think Clemson will win out. So I think they could get in over Clemson.
They're all undefeated. Alabama's undefeated, Ohio State's undefeated, Clemson's undefeated.
Yeah, but I don't think if they all went out, do you think Notre Dame could get in over any of those teams?
Notre Dame is not getting in over an undefeated Alabama team. They're not.
Clemson team.
Oh my goodness. I got to think that a conference championship game is going to, can you imagine that there are going to be upsets? So can you imagine? So you're playing out a scenario in which Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, and Clemson are all undefeated along with Notre Dame. So we've got 5 undefeated teams.
Yeah.
And who's going to get left out?
I think it would be Clemson. I don't think Clemson's that great this year. Like, their offense has not really impressed me.
So that's really going to rely. So the one thing that's going to hurt Notre Dame is obviously they're not going to have the 13th data point, the conference championship. The thing that's going to hurt Clemson is right now, by all measurements, and I don't know if you had a chance to check out my video ranking the conferences, the ACC has been awful. Awful. I did not think it was the worst conference in college football, but the results on the field are telling us that it's the worst conference in America right now. So to your point, and if Clemson doesn't look impressive, they really don't have any more impressive games to play. South Carolina, but they've already lost 2 games.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Louisville would be pretty good coming into this year, but they have not been good at all.
Yeah. So this is what we've got for Notre Dame. They go to Blacksburg next week to take on Virginia Tech. Then they've got Pitt at home, Navy at home, Northwestern on the road. That's probably in Chicago, I would guess. Florida State at home, Syracuse in New York City, and they finish up with a trip to the LA Coliseum.
Yeah, that's a hell of a schedule.
My goodness, they always play a rough schedule. And if it doesn't turn out to be rough, it's certainly not their fault because they line it up with just the Ball State game is the only, and they certainly can be given a pass on that because other than that, my goodness, it's a good schedule. It always is. And man, Syracuse is much better than they usually are. And Northwestern looks to be pretty decent. And Pitt looks to be the easiest game.
Mm-hmm. I think Syracuse had every opportunity in the world to win that game today.
Of course they did. Yep.
What was it? They went for it on 4th down, and he threw it to that tight end, I think it was. But they was offside or a false start.
Yes.
They had to call it back.
Yep.
That could have iced the game more than likely.
I'm just checking out the scores here. I'm a happy man because Oregon's up 18 against Cal starting the 4th quarter. I like that. Okay. I got to protect those picks, So, Chris, I appreciate the call. Is there anything else going on?
No, thank you for allowing me to call. You have a good night, Mark.
Of course. Thanks so much, Chris.
Okay.
Chris Harris joining the show as well. So I will look back at the chat to see if there's any other questions that you guys have, any other comments. I think we've covered it pretty well. I always jump on here with the instant analysis thinking that the show's going to go like in order. And when I mean in order up here, like I'm going to talk about Ohio State and Penn State and really get all my thoughts out. Then I'm going to move on to Stanford and Notre Dame. Then I'm going to talk Florida, Mississippi State or Kentucky, South Carolina. Boom, 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 LSU and Ole Miss and all these games. But of course, people have different questions and comments, and then we just circle around, and that's what makes it fun. And we talk about whatever comes up. So we appreciate you jumping on the line, talking college football with us. I will have my top 25 that makes sense out tomorrow. I will not rank the conferences this week because there were no significant non-conference games. So if you want to check out my conference rankings, just look up the video I cut last week. It was the ACC down from 3 to 5. And then the Pac-12 at 4, the Big 12 at 3, the Big 10 at 2, and then a big gap with the SEC at number 1. And I base that much like I do my top 25 on the resumes. All right. As we look through today, maybe I'll make a final comment on these games. Oregon's bounced back in a tricky spot at Cal, coming off that very disappointing loss in which they blew the game with a fumble with 45 seconds left against Stanford to pretty much control the game against Cal right now, 35-17, but the Bears do have the ball just starting the 4th quarter. Alabama rolls 56-14 over Louisiana, but unfortunately for me, didn't roll well enough. They didn't roll Tide minus 49. They only won by 42. Georgia cakewalk over Tennessee 38-12, although the Vols did put a couple touchdown passes by Jared Garantano on the board to make it 24-12 around the fourth quarter mark. So it did make it semi-interesting for a few minutes. The other interesting storyline there is that Justin Fields got some significant playing time, ran for a couple touchdowns, threw 2 passes. So Jake Fromm might be feeling a little heat. That could be another quarterback scenario in which a team is just really good, but they want to be that much better and prepared for a college football playoff. Jake Fromm, I think, in a little bit different category, though, than Jalen Hurts and Kelly Bryant because of his obvious passing skills. Clemson, we talked about it all day. Check out the videos, instant analysis earlier today. We went right to the live stream when Trevor Lawrence got hurt and discussed that and the Clemson quarterback situation. And then obviously when they scored the 2 touchdowns late. And Bryce, the freshman, or he's a sophomore now or a redshirt freshman, he was recruited and signed in 2017, played poorly early, got his sea legs, played well late, made some critical throws, made a big run as well. And Clemson pulled it out with 2 scores in the last 10 minutes to win 27-23. We saw Ohio State, Penn State, another classic between the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions. And if Penn State is going to continue to finish in the top 10, go 10-2, and not get past Ohio State, whether it be we beat them, but the playoff selection committee selected them, or we can't beat them, this is going to be a tough spot for Penn State. But we all kind of knew this when they reorganized the divisions in the Big Ten, that if Penn State was going to make it back, wow, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, boy, to get out of that division is going to take some work. But Dwayne Haskins came of age, 96-yard drive. 2 touchdowns needed by the Buckeyes in the last 8 minutes. In the second one, a 96-yard drive. Haskins delivers. The Buckeyes defense gets it done. A curious play call by Penn State on the 4th and 5 play. Crushing loss for Penn State in losing 27-26. They are going to hope that the Buckeyes lose twice for them to get to the Big Ten championship game. LSU rolls over Ole Miss 45-16. This is the first time I've seen this final score. I'm in love with this final score because I picked LSU -10. Oklahoma rolls over Baylor. Kyler Murray did not start because he was late for practice on Friday. Then all he did was come into the game after some remedial discipline of missing like 3 plays or maybe a series. I should look up the play-by-play. But all he did was account for 7 touchdowns as Oklahoma rolled 66-33 over Baylor. We talked up Notre Dame. Just got off the phone with a caller, Chris Harris, in regards to Notre Dame's path to the college football playoff. And with Stanford and Michigan out of the way, it appears pretty clear on one hand, but on the other hand, we know what happens in college football. Florida State's out there. It seems ludicrous that Florida State could hang with Notre Dame. Let's not be surprised. But Notre Dame, even at 1 loss, considering what typically happens around the nation in the other conferences, we didn't have any undefeated teams. Central Florida. We didn't have any other undefeated teams last season. But so Notre Dame going undefeated seems, even though they've cleared the obvious hurdles, they still have some games to play, of course, at 5-0. Auburn wins. Nobody really talked about that. It seems like a workmanlike kind of ho-hum effort by 11 points, 24-13 over Southern Miss. Washington, love that score. I had Washington -17. They cleared that in defeating BYU 35-7. Doesn't make the Wisconsin effort against BYU look real good for the Badgers or the Big Ten. West Virginia rolls early, hangs on to beat Texas Tech 42-34. Will Grier was outstanding, and I only saw the first quarter, but he was throwing darts and lasers all over the field. Man, he looked like a Heisman player. Central Florida beats Pitt 45-14. So Central Florida continues to schedule mid-level Power 5 teams and whips them. Now, it would be great to see Central Florida, Oklahoma, Central Florida, Washington, but they take on mid-level teams in Power 5 conferences. And in the case of Pitt this year, maybe not mid-level, but they dispose of them rather easily. Mackenzie Milton went 18 of 34 for 328 and 4 touchdowns. Michigan, as I mentioned and talked to the previous couple callers, didn't look the part for most of this game, but credit them. It's a Big Ten road victory. They win in Evanston, down 17-0. They come back and win it 20-17. South Carolina, Kentucky, we talked about it. Kentucky is now defeated Florida, Mississippi State, and South Carolina consecutively, and they have given up in those 3 games 33 points. 33 points in 3 games to 3 SEC teams. 3 talented teams, offensively challenged, but talented teams. Teams that recruit in the top 25 in the nation. And Kentucky held them to 16, 7, and 10 and won all those games by double digits. Astounding. Kentucky's 5-0. Where are they going to be in my top 25? Where were they last week? Number 5. And I had all sorts of people just going crazy, telling me what an idiot and moron I am for ranking Kentucky number 5 last week. Oh, I should rank them number 1 this week. Texas beat Kansas State 19-14. They led early 19-0, but fortunately for me, they did not clear the 8.5 points that I took on Kansas State. Michigan State beat Central Michigan. Sloppy effort by Sparty. They only ran for like 3.5 yards a carry against Central Michigan. Then I heard Brian Lewerke on the podium tonight talking about how Michigan State's committed to the run and we ran the ball really well today. What? You ran the ball for 3 yards a carry against Central Michigan. So tougher games ahead for Sparty. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. Purdue, they have to play as well. Virginia Tech, credit Justin Fuente. The embarrassment last week on the road at Old Dominion. Backup quarterback Ryan Willis had a nice game. 17 of 27, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. Virginia Tech, I picked that upset. Picked them to win outright. They won at Duke 31-14. Look at the Hokies now for a Coastal Division. Sure, they lost to ODU. That doesn't count, of course, toward the ACC. Virginia Tech's beaten Florida State and Duke on the road. Florida, Mississippi State, we talked about that game. The Gators win 13-6. Ugly game in the score box, but man, I love these games. I had that game on my laptop, and I was entertained. It was close. It went down to the final possession. Felipe Franks threw for 219. That's like a monster game for him. And the Gators win to move on to 4-1, 3-1 in the SEC. And the Mississippi State right now, one of the major disappointments in the country. It's not like they're having an awful season, but 3-2 and 2 losses in the SEC after many thought that they would contend for an SEC Western Division championship, and they've already lost to Kentucky and Florida. So they haven't even seen LSU or Auburn or Alabama or Texas A&M yet. All right, folks, I'm going to check the live chat real quick and then call it a night. We were here at 10 o'clock this morning talking college football, and I appreciate you joining us. Because I've been on all day, I reserve the right for that much time to do a little sales job. Amazon descriptions. If you go to any of the videos and grab the link from Amazon, if you do any shopping with Amazon, you don't have to buy the products that are displayed on the links. Just grab the link, enter Amazon using one of the links, and you help us out immensely. The other thing is, if you want the newsletter, and Bama Boy, you mentioned in the chat that you're not getting the newsletter. So something's wrong there. Please send me another email. Bama Boy, if you're still on the line, I apologize. I don't know what the deal is. I've gotten the newsletter to everyone else. Apparently, nobody else has complained. So please send me your email. We'll get it worked out and send it to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. And we'll get you, there's something happening there. So we'll get it sent. Anybody else? Talk to people on the chat. Ask them about the newsletter. We think we're doing a nice job with it. It can get better. It will get better. But we think we're doing a nice job with the newsletter. It comes out every Monday. The Voice of College Football. Please send your email to my Gmail address, MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. We'll get you the newsletter. And if you want any back copies, just let me know. It's basically my take and perspective on the weekend. It's a channel update. And what people like you, the hardcore college football fans, really love, stats, trends, and facts from the weekend. All right. Anything else, folks? One more time to the chat. And I will take other phone calls. 860-325-3687. I apologize. It's not listed down here. I've explained many times why it's not, and we'll get there someday, folks. But it's 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687. I put it in the chat. Antonio Brooks, Reasonable Gump, just stay tuned. Dexter Williams is finally free. Yes, I mentioned that in my preview. One of the reasons why I picked the Irish is that Dexter Williams was back after a 4-game suspension. USC fan, what did Kentucky do to change from being awful to world beaters overnight? Well, they've recruited well now for about 4 years under Mark Stoops, top 25 classes. And to be in a position that they're in after having a quarterback situation in which they had no quarterbacks on the roster who had ever thrown any passes at this level. They were one of the few teams in the nation that had nobody on the roster that had ever thrown a pass in FBS play coming into this season. DJ Bucci, LSU in the top 4. I had LSU number 1 a few weeks ago. Yes, their resume, Ole Miss, Auburn, Miami, they have 3 of the best wins in the country for one team. Now, it's starting to weaken a little bit with Louisiana Tech and Ole Miss the last few weeks, and you know that I go by resume. So I deconstruct my top 25 from last week. I tear it to the ground, and I rebuild it based on the resume, which unfortunately, the more games they play, the more I've got to think about it and compare and contrast. The first week, it's nice because I just say, who beat the best team? They're number 1. All right. Shane reminds us that Nick Bosa did not play tonight. And Nick Bosa, I think the difference between Nick Bosa and everybody else on that defensive line is that Draymond Jones is great. He's exceptional. He's versatile. He can go inside or outside. The other players, Jace Young, very athletic. Nick Bosa is basically an NFL defensive end right now. He has that kind of technique, and it's probably from playing with his brother and being schooled by his brother that he has developed techniques that are advanced, pass rush techniques, and he knows how to play at that level. That's why he's that good, in addition to the talent. All right. We've got a number of people on here that I've never seen before. So we've got Athletic Dasshole, Athletic Dasshole. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV. Please subscribe. You're finding the best insight and analysis of college football. Please subscribe to my new YouTube channel. All right. Who else is on the line? USC fan or South Carolina isn't good. Yeah, that's right. It does say USC fan. I assumed that was, the USC. Will Muschamp won't be head coach in 2019. You heard it here first. In 2019? Weren't most South Carolina fans singing Will Muschamp's praises after last season, going 9-4 from 3 wins to 6 to 9? And as I warned everyone, and I'm not saying that everybody was buying South Carolina, but a few people were, is that to go from 9 wins, meaning 5-3 in the SEC, to take that next step, you're going from, okay, to go from 3 to 6 to 9, we're starting to be able to beat the Kentuckys and the Vanderbilts and the Tennessees. And I know that they have had no luck beating Kentucky, so that was a bad example. But beating those mid-tier and lower-tier teams takes you from awful to decent to good. But then to take the next step in the SEC, you've got to start beating Texas A&M and Georgia, and you have to start winning games like that. That's the difficult. You have to start beating top 15 teams in the country. How do Alabama recruits get new Jeeps, Mark? They come from good families that support them. NBA fan, lengthy email. When I type it into Gmail, it says the email does not exist. Okay, here's my email. MarkRogersTV gmail.com. Everybody else has done this successfully. NBA fan, we will help you out, because I know how frustrating it is when somebody says, well, this works for everybody else. Well, it's not working for me. So somebody's doing something wrong here. So there it is. Antonio, how long have you been watching? Jamie, jumping on the line late. I hate to break this up with 45 people on the line. We've got 1:30 a.m. What else do I have going on? If I ever get a life back, then this isn't necessarily going to go on like this. Kentucky football is unbeatable now. Apparently, they're going 12-0. We truly are in a parallel universe, aren't we? And now, if Duke would have won, if Duke and Syracuse would have won, I saw somebody mention the other day where it almost looked like a Final Four NCAA basketball bracket. Duke, Syracuse, Kentucky, and who was the other one? 4-0. Another basketball power. I'm forgetting. Duke, Syracuse, Kentucky. It was somebody else, obvious. Another big-time college basketball program. But no more. Duke's streak is over. They got bludgeoned tonight at home, even with Daniel Jones back at quarterback. Notre Dame, Bama, Georgia, LSU in the playoff. What? No, it could happen, and this is how it happens. Whoever wins the LSU Alabama game goes to the SEC championship game, and they beat an undefeated Georgia team, so they all have one loss. But if Clemson has one loss or no losses and Ohio State has 0 or 1 loss, then there you go. All right, everyone. I appreciate you guys. You guys do an exceptional job of jumping on here. I always enjoy the discussion. I have some smartphone calls, some smart chat. This is college football discussion and debate for the smart fan, for the hardcore fan. That is you. And this is why we started this Mark Rogers TV business, was that I wanted to talk college football and do it for the smart fan and for the high-level stuff. Number one ND fan, thank you. Appreciate it. Bear Bryant's great-grandson, Tyson, coming 6'2", 220 quarterback. Two of his brothers coming to Alabama as well. Don't forget about Notre Dame. Jamie, no way in hell Urban goes to South Carolina, but Urban needs to stay far away from South Carolina. Urban Meyer to South Carolina? Was that stated somewhere? So there is the rumor that Ryan Day is taking over the Ohio State football program at the end of this season. Where does Urban Meyer go? Does he still want to coach, or does he ride off into the sunset? Joe Burrow. What about Joe Burrow? Shane, I have never seen you comment before. Who do you root for? How long have you been watching? Antonio, I have never seen you comment before. Would love to know who you root for and how long you've been watching. Buckeye State Sports preseason. I picked Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Notre Dame. I'm sticking with that, and you should. I picked Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. Georgia needs more of a passing game, so does Kentucky. You would think so, but they might be able to make it to the SEC championship game. One of them is going to be there. All right, folks, here's the bottom line. I need more subscribers. I'm going to be blatant. I'm going to be just out there. So I need more subscribers. So if there's anybody out there, whether you know them personally, family, friends, or they're just social media acquaintances on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just let them know that we're here. I'm starting to knock out some videos for SG1 Sports. The reason I'm doing that is to gain more exposure. He needs content. He has come to me a couple times to let me know, hey, Mark, love your content. Would love you to give me as much college football content as my channel as possible. The only thing I've said to him is I am building my brand and my channel here. And people got upset back in June when I produced videos and I put them on his channel and my channel, and they were the same video. So I said that I would no longer do that. That if I was going to do a Penn State, Ohio State preview for him and do one for me, that they would be completely different videos. So that would not be deceiving anyone. But I am producing videos for SG1 Sports. I did a Stanford Notre Dame prediction video and also an Ohio State Penn State video for him. But again, I'm trying to draw subscribers, of course, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And I have done it the hard way. I've just produced content. For those guys out there, for you who have watched me for a long time, you know that I'm just cranking this stuff out constantly. I've not looked into the marketing, the sales, the affiliates, the sponsorships. I've not looked into the analytics of YouTube. I've not done any of that stuff, which I should do. So maybe I'll shut down for a month during the off season, but I hate to do that because there's always something to talk about. I want to talk about spring practice. I want to talk about recruiting. I want to talk about National Signing Day. May and June are the best times to talk about like historical topics, best all-time programs, best all-time coaches. If you look back at my videos from the previous off seasons, I dive into all those fun topics that we don't have time to debate during the season. But I may just do that. May have to do that. Brad, I appreciate it. Silver Dog, who do you root for? Because you're new to the show. And I'm probably sounding like I'm just completely incoherent at this point. We got up after staying up till like 5 o'clock in the morning, got up at 9:30, and I was thinking about blowing off the show, but I got up at 9:30 and I staggered through 2 hours, and then we did a bunch of instant analysis, as you well know, and I've been talking for 2 hours here nonstop, and I'm dragging to an end. So you guys are the best. Reasonable Gump, you can take a break during February. Yeah, after National Signing Day, I possibly could. But if you would look back at my videos, it just seems like I can just never take a break because I always, what I would love to do, and I almost accomplished this a couple of years ago during the off season, was I wanted to deliver a top 10 national ranking of every position: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive linemen, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, deep, the cornerbacks, the safeties, everything across the board. Top 10 in the nation, top 5 in every conference. So that's like 12 positions, 5 conferences. That's like 60 videos, plus the top 10 nationally, ranking the coaches, doing positional rankings, and doing positional previews, the Iowa linebackers. I'll probably stop doing that kind of ridiculous stuff and getting 35 views for that. Top 10 punters. Yes, I've done top 10 punters. Yes, I have in the past. Believe it or not, I don't think most of you have seen me for a number of years. And yes, I have been crazy enough to do the top 10 punters, the top 10 place kickers, every position. Saint Productions 1. I've not seen your handle before. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. I do this because I love college football. And I'm certainly going to be honest about, I would like to do this more effectively in terms of the production. I would like it to be a better presentation, bells and whistles, and look good. And I would like to make some money. And so I can do it better and I can devote more time. So I do it because I love college football. But yes, I am doing this for the business as well. And so the comments that you guys leave keep me going. So that's an inspiration when you guys give me, and even if you give me negative comments, if they are of a nature of debate, that's why I'm here. I don't mind you guys challenging my perspective on something. I love that in the comments section. If you do it respectfully, Even the people that call me names, I think it's funny. And call me an idiot. That's funny. Mark, do an analytical video on why Alabama can't find a kicker. Maybe you can answer that head-scratching question for me. We've talked about it. I haven't necessarily broken it down in terms of when was the last time Alabama truly had a kicker of an elite level. It is staggering, isn't it? Buckeye State Sports. Mark, I did see your video where you picked the Reds to finish 4th in the Central in 2010. That's funny. That is funny. Trapland Music. Who do you root for? Thank you for loving the show. Go Bucks. Okay, you root for the Buckeyes. Sorry. Alabama's garbage. LSU ready for that. Buckeye State Sports. He went back into the archives. Goodness gracious. Lee Tiffin, 2009. Yep. Oh, my goodness. So when I first started this, and let's not even start, but I'm just going to make this one comment, because if I start talking about the channel, and then we're going to go on forever. But basically, I just knew I wanted to start a sports channel, and I obviously love college football, but I love the NFL, and I love baseball too. After that, there's a big dip. I don't really care about anything else, but I'll watch an NBA playoff game with my son. But basically, it's football and baseball that I just thought at the beginning, I'm just going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. Then it quickly determined that if I talk about baseball one day and then the baseball fans watch me and then I don't talk about baseball for a month because it starts football season, well, anyway, I would have to narrow the focus. And yeah, I love the NFL. Sorry. Love the NFL for different reasons. And I explained one of those this morning. So basically, there's no way that I could cover all that. Obviously, I can't even cover college football. And I think that's one of my problems with building this channel is, let's say you're a Georgia fan. And let's say you stumble across one of my videos and I'm previewing the Georgia-South Carolina game. And you're like, yeah, I thought that was a pretty good video. Boom, I'm going to subscribe. And then you're like, where are the rest of the Georgia videos? This guy's not talking about Georgia. He's talking about Oklahoma and Ohio State and all these other teams I could care less about. And I'm not seeing a Georgia preview for the next game against Vanderbilt. Gone by unsubscribe. So I think that happens because it's impossible, as you guys know, for me to cover everyone. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not talking to as many guests anymore about specific teams, because I figure we can get on here and talk about all the teams all the time. All right, folks, it's 1:42 Eastern time. And even though that's just the beginning of the night for me, typically, I'm just kind of unusually worn down tonight. So I thank you so much. And for me, 45 watching is typically a good night. So I hate to let it go. So thank you so much. We will be cranking out content over the next week, previewing next week, week 6. I have no idea off the top of my head who's playing next week, but I'm sure there's a batch of great games, as there always are. And I will preview those games. We'll do our predictions this week. For those of you that love the betting angle, I recommend that you join me at 11:45 a.m. Eastern time on Friday if you're not working or doing something else, because, of course, you can always watch it after it posts, but you can see the live stream with Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info. It's a fascinating talk about the betting angle, and we go through the week of that weekend's games from a betting perspective. Brad says, I can't understand what he says. Are we talking about my guy, Steve Merrill? You guys talking about somebody else? All right. Anyway, yes, Indiana, Ohio State at the Shoe coming up this week. And Notre Dame's got Virginia Tech. So, yeah, we'll talk about all this stuff. Terry Ann McWright, I got your last name correct. It was so nice to talk to you a few nights ago. Thanks for your call. Have a good night. Take care. Brad, LSU keeps getting beat by Bama, almost sad, 7 times in a row. Well, they're going to have another shot this November, aren't they? All right, everyone. It's been great. I enjoy this more than you know. Thanks so much for the support. Again, leave your comments, your questions, your suggestions, anything that you've got for me. Sign up for the newsletter. Just send your email to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. And of course, the Amazon links are in the description section below. Thank you so much. And don't forget about the helmets. Tell me the 2 helmets that you want me to purchase, and the 2 helmets that have the most votes on October 1st. I am purchasing those. Do not leave your comments in the chat section here because I'll miss it. Just go to one of the videos and leave it in the comments section, and I'm going to purchase at least 2 helmets. They can be anybody. I don't care. Akron, San Diego State, whoever it turns out to be, we're going to add them. All right, everyone. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We do it better than everyone else, not because of me, but because of you. We are the voice of college football. I will see you next time.